Well, welcome in. It is great to be here and share the Sports Spectrum Weekly Slant with you once again. Shout out to my teammates in this process and in this venture, Brock Heward and Jason Romano. Brock's busy doing football this week because, well, there's NFL football every night this week, with the exception of Wednesday night and then Friday night, of course, for Christmas Eve. That's the way the schedule wound up shaking out because of some changes that the National Football League had to make. And it's just a busy week all around. Even without all the football, we're all getting ready to celebrate the birth of our Savior, Jesus. And so if you're anything like me, I'm a mom, I'm running around trying to wrap up all those loose ends and really just enjoy just the amazing blessing of this Christmas season, and to take the time to do that with my family and my kids. And it's really special. And I hope it is just as special for you. And, one of the things that we have to be so grateful for is everything that we have, everything that we get to enjoy, the benefit of our home, the benefit of our family around us, the benefit of being able to wrap a present and put it under the tree for our children. And that leads me to our partner in this, our sponsor in Compassion. Before I tell you about them, just take a look.
In 2020, COVID-19 hit the world where it hurts most. Already vulnerable children and their families were left in even greater need.
The storm is upon us.
The coronavirus. The world is on the brink of a hunger pandemic, pushed millions into starvation.
Not on our watch.
Some professional athletes and coaches are teaming up.
We partnered up with Compassion International to raise enough money for 70,000 kids.
I'm Case Keenum.
I'm Alyssa Nair.
My name's Carson Palmer.
I'm Billy Jess.
I'm Jacob Slavin.
I'm Maggie Myers.
I'm Dakota Dozier.
I'm Jason McCourty.
I'm Devin McCourty.
I'm Elizabeth Eddy.
And I'm teaming up.
I'm teaming up.
I'm teaming up.
And we're teaming up.
We teamed up because we know this is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Let's go.
It really is so moving when you can actually see the vision of the people that Compassion reaches. And of course, we are still working, we are striving, we are filling the stadium. And it is such an honor to be able to share that with you. Head to fillthestadium.com, sponsor a child in need, because like I said, as we sit there and we get ready to celebrate Christmas this week, there are children who are in poverty all around the world. And this is a way that you can reach them. This is a conversation that I'm having with my own kids, where, my husband and I have talked about it, and we want to sponsor a child with our family. And that's something that we're doing, heading to the website and looking at the bios of these children and finding one that my kids can choose and say, oh, I want to help that child and I identify with their family. And what a privilege to be able to do that. So I would encourage you to take the time and make the time to do that this Christmas season, this season where we really put the emphasis on giving. Give in a way that is so meaningful that you're helping somebody else meet the basic needs of shelter and food and water, and do it in the name of Jesus. So really excited to welcome our guest here on the Sports Spectrum Weekly Slant tonight. He is a guy that I used to sit with on the NFL live set at ESPN, longtime offensive lineman in the league. His video breakdowns were always great. And now, of course, you get to hear him do them on live game broadcasts with Fox. Just my pleasure to catch up with Mark Schlereth this week. Well, it's just really fun to be able to reunite with Mark Schlereth in this way. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's a football season, so I am slammed as per usual. But I tell you, I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm just blessed. It's funny, you go back through your life and you look at kind of the things that you were told by your parents. You know how your parents tell you things and you don't really want to listen to your parents, but they get indelibly marked on you somehow. My dad used to always say, find something you love to do and you'll never have to go to work. And that's not my dad's. It's just something that he used to say to me all the time as a kid, amongst a bunch of other things that have always stuck with me. And so, shoot, I was passionate about football. That's the only thing I ever wanted to do since I was 12 years old. And, I'm just still, like, every day pinch myself, still showing up and essentially living out my childhood dream. And so I tell you, one of the things I do on a daily basis is I every day I get up and early, and I'm always been an early bird guy anyhow, but I do a radio show in Denver, but I get up an extra 20 minutes early, half hour early to do a devotional every morning, and then to just spend time in prayer. Really more than anything else is just intentional gratitude.
Mm,
Just being very conscientious and conscious of the fact that, every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so every day I just am like, regardless of all the things that you have to get done that day, I just want you to know, Lord, that I am thankful to have a job. I'm thankful to have things that I love to do, that I'm passionate about. And I'm even thankful for the stuff that I don't want to do, right? But I just want you to know that I'm just grateful and I'm thankful. And so anyhow, it's one of those things that I just try to spend that time every day, in like I said, in thankfulness and in gratitude.
it's funny because I feel like when you are intentionally grateful like that and you
Mhm.
carve out the time to really just appreciate the things that you do have, and like you said, maybe it's not even the stuff that you love all the time,
Right.
it just seems like that reaps more blessings. It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, it just changes perspective. It
Yeah,
changes your perspective on the day, and it allows you. I think for me, it just allows you to see things through a different lens.
yeah,
Through I always kind of call it my God's eye lens. It just refocuses me, so I'm looking through instead of the like. I can't believe I have to do this. I can't believe I get to do this. It's
mhm.
something that simple, um, it's amazing what it does for you perspective wise. And so, again, like I said, I am so blessed. I get to live out my childhood dream, and I got to play the game that I loved. And now, I get to study it every day. I get to talk about it. I'm constantly jibber jabbering. I'm doing the broadcast, and it's such a challenge. It's so, go from doing studio for 16, 17 years and
Sure.
then flipping into games, and it's so much more challenging, and it really is fun. So it's just been a really cool transition for me to get to do it, and hopefully I do it well enough to where I get to continue to do it. But there's no guarantees.
There's no guarantees in anything. Look, you
Right.
you and I actually found that out, right, on the NFL Live set together.
Right. Yeah, we both did our last day of ESPN together, so, uh, yeah, we come off the set, and so I knew it was my last day.
I
I
found out while we were on the air, actually.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you did an unbelievable job of keeping it all together because I knew going in, they're like, "Hey, you can't mention it. If you feel the need to mention it, you can just go now or whatever." And you know, but it was one of those things that was kind of mutually agreed upon. It was just one of those things. It was time for me to go.
Sure.
And so it worked out. To me, it worked out great. I loved it.
What's been the transition like? And you referenced it a little bit, the challenge of like being back out there broadcasting now. And, to me, that's like the closest you're going to get to the game as a
Right.
broadcaster, right? Like you're in the booth, you're sort of in the thick of it while the game is going on. If you're not playing, that's as
Yeah.
close as you're going to get. So, what has that been like for you? And sort of how do you thrive on that now?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot like playing without, beating the snot out of yourself. So that part,
That's a win.
yeah, that's a big victory. Um, I tell you, I am so much more connected to the game. I talk to coaches and players every week. I have a bunch of teams that I talk to, a bunch of coaches that even if I'm not covering the game, coaches that I talk to that I connect with. I consult for a couple of teams, so it's been one of those things where they want a perspective of a former player, and a lot of what I consult on is the running game,
Mhm.
and just offensive line play in general.
Sure.
So that part for me that part's been a really cool transition, and I've made a lot of connections and a lot of friends in the coaching profession that you don't have as much time. You don't get that as a studio guy because you're always every day you're in the studio and
Yeah.
um
It's a different type of grind.
right, yeah. And so that part has been really cool traveling um with a team. Like yeah, I think you don't realize, or maybe you don't realize, maybe when you grow up being an athlete and you grow up in sports, I think the thing I always loved more than anything else was just being part of something bigger than yourself, right?
Mm,
Just
yeah,
being part of a team is
absolutely.
it's a really cool thing. And I always look at that aspect of, I think when you're doing it, maybe you don't even realize sometimes how much a part of your life that is, and how cool those connections are and those bonds are, and relying on one another, and it's kind of this own family thing. And I think ultimately it was modeled for us by Jesus. I mean,
Mm,
you think about when Jesus started his ministry, first thing he did was to get 12 guys together,
yep.
right? Get the
Get my
disciples
team.
together.
Get them
Hey, let's
around
get
me.
a team. Now
Yeah.
we're gonna go change the world. And I love that. I love, a group text message while I'm watching film, and I've got my producer on there, I got my associate director on there, I got my director on there. I'm like, and we got my BA on there. Hey man, this is what I'm looking at. What do you guys think about this? Well, should we build something for that? Like just stuff like that we're constantly going back and forth, and everybody is grinding, and everybody's working to try to make the broadcast as good as it can be. You never know what kind of game you're going to get. You don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
But you're trying to do all this prep work, and I don't know, 85% of it, 90% of it, you never get to. I mean, it just kind of gets flushed. But it's that process, and then getting to go out on Friday nights, and as a group, and have dinner together, um, and just talk, and flip each other grief, and it's just that part is so cool for me. And it's very much like playing. So I love that aspect of teamwork and being a part of a team.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it goes back to Jesus in the sense of it's finding that appreciation for the process because that's
Mhm.
really the part that you have to love. Like everybody likes to win, everybody likes the end result, but you never know what that's going to be. Like you don't go into a season and know you're going to win a Super Bowl. Like
Right,
that's just not the way it works. If you love the process of
right,
chasing after winning, it changes your perspective on everything. It just inherently does
yeah,
because you love it as you're doing it. You don't just love what you're chasing.
right, yeah. You love the process. You love the people that you're in process with, and it becomes really powerful when you love the people that you work with and that you're in process with, that you care more about them than you care about yourself.
Mhm.
And I always kind of love, the feeding of the 5,000, right? You can find it in Matthew and Mark, and I think John. But after Jesus feeds the 5,000, he sends his disciples to go ahead of him so he can stay and pray. And so they're out in the sea, and the sea, starts saying they're a good way off, and
Yeah.
and I think there's a couple things about that story that are cool. Jesus walking on water. First off, they're a good way off. He just doesn't whistle and say, "Hey, come back and get me." He just he like, again, he wants to be with the team, right?
Sure. He's
So he
like,
just
"I'm gonna make my way to them." Yeah.
right. So you, I'm going to walk here. And then I think one of the things I heard a pastor say this once, and always resonated with me. Um, be Peter, the guy that got out of the boat,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's just like everybody's got a story, but everybody's was there. They saw it. But what guy was the guy that got? I mean, he didn't just have the story. He has the life experience, right?
Mhm.
Tell me to come to you, if it is you, and I'll get out of this boat. And he got that experience. So
Right.
I just think that whole connection part, that longing to be with one another and longing to sacrifice and do things with each other, um, is the thing that I think probably intrigues me most about about just being a teammate. And so I've always that part of sports has always really resonated, or sports, TV, family, whatever it is, it's always
Sure.
resonated with me. And it probably, obviously it comes from your family, but it comes from my background of wanting to be involved in athletics and wanting to be a member of a team. And so
Yeah.
that to me is the coolest thing about going out and doing games is
Yeah.
boom, we're together. And last week, I sat with my producer. His name is Barry Landis. I sat with my producer. We both got into our production room at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we finished our meeting at 9 o'clock that night.
Sure.
And we just sat there and prepped, and then we talked about the game, and then we did some prep, and then we took a phone call, and then we talked about the game, and then we prepped, and then we had a snack, and it was just, it was like it was, but it's cool. You're just kind of there, and it's just, again, nothing significant. That to me, Jade, is like raising kids. One of the things I always get asked, like if I'm out speaking corporately or whatever, one of the things I
Sure.
always get asked is, what did you do to spend quality time with your kids? And I go, listen, anytime I set an hour aside to spend some quality time with my kids, they do something to piss me off, right?
Yeah.
And so,
100%.
right. So for me, it was always quantity time. You like
Yeah.
just being there.
That's
And
so true. And you hear people reverse it all the time. People are like, "Oh no, like it's not the quantity, it's the quality." And it's like,
right.
no,
Well,
no, no,
within
it's the
that,
presence."
right. Within that quantity, there's going to be a sliver of quality, but
Right.
you can't, just like you can't control
You can't
time,
script
you
it.
can't control it. It happens when it happens.
Yep.
And if you're not there, it doesn't happen. And you can never force it to happen. And so that's one of the cool things about our group, and traveling together every week is we're just kind of there. We're just, hey, let's, hang out and let's kind of do this stuff. And so that's
Yeah.
been the cool thing about doing games for me.
And I think some of it too, to go back to, you know, be the one who gets out of the boat, right? Like
Mhm.
to go back to that is it requires trust too
Right.
on all sides, right? Like, you have to be willing to trust that if you get out of the boat for anyone, that they're going to be there to lift you up if you start to sink, right?
Right.
I mean, that's part of it too. And that's a huge element of being part of a team.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. To be vulnerable to, yeah, when you,
Yeah,
yeah, all that stuff. I mean, I saw this thing with Jason Kelsey that he got a really emotional talking about Lane Johnson and some of the mental issues that, some of the depression
sure.
issues, the mental issues. And, it's really cool when you can be that tied together and you can be that vulnerable and you can care for one another that much.
Mm,
Um, One of the coolest things we did when I was a player with the Broncos is we would shut down our meetings on Fridays, half an hour early or so, maybe 45 minutes early. And our offensive line coach, Alex Gibbs, would put a topic on the board. And then we would just start talking,
it's awesome.
and just talk about whatever that topic was. And, some of them were really hard, like hard things to talk about. But I think the whole at the time, I think sometimes you don't think about what the motivation for that is. But as I look back again, it was about community and it was about coming together and about
Yeah.
realizing that, we may come from different parts of the country and different, geographical backgrounds and different social backgrounds and different economic backgrounds. But the bottom line is there's a lot more that connects us as people, um,
Mhm.
there is that divides us as people. And when you start to look at each other that way, as saying, hey, man, like we all want the same things, right? We want health, we want prosperity, we want to be loved, we want to be cared for, we want to be able to provide that for our children's safety and all that kind of stuff. You start to realize that, hey, man, like we all grew up in different places and we all grew up a little bit differently with some different beliefs. But the bottom line is the things that connect us are far greater than the things that divide us. And if we're going to be really good, we just have to respect one another and then have to play for one another. And it
Sure.
was for me, it was one of the things that I loved, about my NFL experience, probably more than most things, was that connectivity I had with the group that I played with. The team within the team, that our offensive line, because we were really tied together.
Yeah. It's so similar to the gratitude concept, right? Like if you focus on the things that you're thankful for, it changes your perspective. If you focus on the ways in which you're connected as opposed to the ways that you're
Mhm.
divided, it helps to grow that sense of community. It's very parallel in that
Mhm.
way. You talk about the offensive line units that you were close to, and obviously that's your specialty. You did it for over a decade in the
Mhm.
NFL. And look, we saw last year in the Super Bowl stink that um, you don't have a good offensive line, and all of a sudden it's like Swiss cheese. It's a different game out there.
Right.
So as you've looked at different teams this year and studied their offensive lines, among those that are sort of vying to get into the playoffs and make a strong run here, who jumps out to you at having that ability?
Yeah, it's always interesting. You watch, um, and we get so enamored with quarterback play and throwing the football and wide receivers, and all that periphery stuff, as I like to call it. Um, it's not even all the thing that's interesting about it's not just it's so much more than individualism. Having a great player or a bunch of great players. It's really having a great player or two, but really good players that really play together.
Right.
Um, and then even more than that, having a coach that calls plays to help those guys really have success.
Yeah.
And Tampa's group up front is really, really good, but they got ramshackled by
Oh
New
my
Orleans,
gosh.
right? And
Completely.
and and sometimes the crazy thing is, Jade, is sometimes there is a group that you play against that because of their scheme, because of their personnel and what their personnel does and what the scheme is asked to do, they just match up really well with you.
Right.
And it's just a really hard matchup.
So is
And
that the Saints to the Bucks?
yeah, oh yeah. That for whatever reason, I mean, it's the players. It's like Davenport is playing exceptional, and he has Cam Jordan is an exceptional player. David Anyamata is a great player, and they just have they have Demario Davis is phenomenal. Quan Alexander is great. So they just have their scheme and their system. They've got really great players who just match up well. Now Tampa, will go on to play somebody else, and they'll beat them out of the building. So, it's always one of those things that's kind of hard to put a finger on at times. Philadelphia, even though they're not great right now record wise, their group up front is dominant. I mean,
Mm,
they can flat out play. So it's interesting. I think one of the things that was really cool about watching Kansas City is early in the season for Kansas City, there were a lot of changes up front,
yeah.
personnel, not only personnel, but just scheme wise and things that they want to be able to accomplish. And to watch them gel and kind of come together um, is really cool. And that's one of the cool things about football or sports in general. I used to have a buddy of mine that punted for us when I was in Denver. Tom Ruin had a baseball coach when he was growing up. And he always took not the most talented kids or not the best kids at the tryouts. In Little League, everybody tries out and then
Right.
everybody goes, I'll pick him first, him second, him third, right? And this guy would take kind of some of the scraps and the leftovers. And he said his whole process was taking the green apples and turn them into red delicious by the end of the season. And I think you can do that, through the way you call plays, through the
Yeah.
way you set your guys up, through the way that you adjust based on your players' strengths and your players' weaknesses, and that's where coaching really comes into
Comes in.
play. And so I just think I think that's the fun part of watching um, a team progress. And you mentioned Kansas City last year in the Super Bowl. You can look at all the injuries and stuff, and one of the things they were always able to do is consistently get five guys out in the pattern, and it doesn't matter if the protection breaks down because, well, one, when they had both their tackles, they were really good with Schwartz on one side, Fisher on the other side. But when they lost both those guys,
Right.
there was almost this hubris: is this is the way we're going to win from a coaching standpoint? And I'm like, well, you
Mhm.
same guys there, and I realize that you love to get 5 guys out in the pattern. But when you get 5 guys out in the pattern, it means you're blocking what they call 5-0. I mean, our 5 against your 5, and that's we don't have anybody else. And so, with Tampa and their speed and athleticism on the defensive side of the ball, it was really just a bad plan.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean the players aren't good enough. It just means you got to change what you're doing when you have to play your backup. So just interesting. I don't know that I answered any question there. It's just kind of philosophical approach to playing that position.
Well, I think it's fascinating when you start to peel back the layers of the onion so that, because that's really what it is, right? Like it's putting players in the best positions for them to be able to do the job that they do to the best of their ability. So it's a lot of different things, because then you also have to factor in the matchup, like you said, and okay, who are we playing and
Right.
what is that particular matchup? And do I need to change the way I approach it to put my guys in the best position? There's a lot of layers to the onion there. If you had to give me like your top 2, top 4 in the conferences right now, who would it be?
Team-wise?
Yeah, overall team-wise.
So I think one of the things that I really have always been a big fan of is I've always been a big fan of there's certain guys that I always think are really good that just aren't in very good situations. I've said for years that Matthew Stafford's an elite level quarterback that
Sure.
just played on a franchise, and a franchise that just didn't, for whatever reason, they just didn't understand it. I mean, the guy's never had a running game. The guy, like all these things that go on. So I like the Rams a lot where they are right now. And kind of the direction they're going. So I think the Rams have a chance to be, one of those teams at the end. Obviously, Green Bay and what Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers he's a compound W. He just covers up warts. That's what he does, and the connection he has with Devontae Adams is incredible. I still think Tampa, even though they lost that game, I still think Tampa is the best in the South. But the NFC West, excuse me, is really kind of strange because you got the Rams, you got San Francisco, big physical football team, can really run the ball. I think Kyle Shanahan probably like Jade. I probably talked to 12 teams this off season. Just coaches and teams in general. And as I told you, I consult for some teams in the run game and just in offensive line play in general.
Sure.
There is not one of those 12 teams that wasn't studying the 49ers run game. All of them were. How do you get the angles that you get through motions, through shifts, through personnel groupings, how they attack different players along the defensive line? It's phenomenal. So they're a real physical team, and they're really hard to contend with the way they run the football. Dallas, Dallas offensively has got a little bit of a slump going on. They're just not quite hitting on all cylinders.
Sure.
I called them Sunday, and they wanted to open up the outside run game, which they really did with Tony Pollard. And Zeke was good too, but they really established that. They just need to get in sync again, throwing the football.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that happens. But defensively,
Oh my gosh.
They are. It's freak level defense what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
And then I still think that Kansas City's, I think they're the best team in the AFC. And I tell you what, if they get home field advantage, I mean, it's the Kansas City is
No joke.
played there a bunch. It is one, they're super talented, obviously. I've never seen a team be able to flip the switch. It's like a light switch. They just say, okay, defense, we're not very good for the first 8 weeks or whatever, 6 weeks.
I know. It's amazing what their defense has done. I mean,
flip
honestly.
on the switch and just let's go. So, I think if they get home field advantage, it's going to be hard to go into Kansas City and win a game.
Yeah.
I just think they're the best in the AFC for sure.
All right. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question because it is Christmas week, of course. So as you take your morning time and you do your devotionals and you get ready to celebrate, the birth of our Savior, what does Christmas mean to you?
Well, obviously, like you said, it's celebrating the birth of Jesus, and and the fact that that I've got a home, and that's in heaven. And so, I lost my mom this year um, to COVID, and that's been kind of a rough. That was obviously, it was very rough to have to go through that, but at the same time, um, you know, it was really cool to be there as a family and to get to say goodbye um, to the woman who devoted her life to our family, and has always been there and has been really the spiritual leader of our family. Um, and so, um, to watch her say to us, she just didn't want to die alone, but she was ready to go.
Mm.
And for us just to be there, for that process, it was, like I said, it was really tough. At the same time, very comforting, that I'm going to get to see her again. So,
Yeah,
that part, I always think about Christmas in general, and how blessed we are, and just to have to have just that ability to be together and to celebrate the birth of our Savior, and to know that there is far more to life than what we see here on earth. So that part is really cool. And then it's always during football season, and I'm a football person. We've gotta, I mean, we've got it all figured out, and we're gonna, we'll be up early, and we'll open up gifts and have breakfast and hang out, and then I'll jump in a car and head to Minnesota to do a game between the Rams and the Vikings. So, but everybody's used to that. It's
sure.
football season, and my kids grew up with a father who played, and they understand that, and the grandkids understand it now too. So that part is really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to take a moment just to say thanks. I love that you share your devotionals online,
Mhm.
and just like the places that you find your encouragement. And I read them sometimes and I'm like, "Ooh, I like that," and I'll reshare them and stuff like that. But I,
Right.
I just think it's great that you make that effort to share it, because you never know who else you might encourage by putting it out there. And I think that's really
Yeah.
special.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I don't do it every day. I don't share them every day, but every now and again, and they're all great. But every now and again, there's one or two that'll just hit you and
Yeah.
say, "Wow,
Like,
I
just
need
jumps out and you're like,
yeah,
"Whoa."
I need to hear that today, and I know if I need to hear it, somebody else probably needed to hear
Yeah,
it as well." So
yeah.
that's one of those things that to me is just a really, I'm honored to be able to do it, and blessed to be able to do it. And then and I tell you what, like I said, I'm very cognizant and very aware of the fact that everything I have is by the grace of God. So I'm thankful.
Amen. As
Yeah.
we all should be and need to be, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Good to reconnect. It's good to see you. I'm glad things are well, and I appreciate you doing the podcast.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Just so fun to sit and get to chat some football with Stink, and also just learn a little bit more about kind of what motivates him, and that team aspect of really every part of his life, and how it has progressed. I love that, and I love how he tied those stories back to Jesus. I just think that that's so significant, and I love, as I said, the devotionals that he shares, because I always find them powerful as well. So I'm grateful that he shares them. As we think about this season of giving, uh, it is so important that we remember, right? The best gift is actually the giving and not the receiving. It is better to give than it is to receive. I feel like I say that to my kids all the time, especially this week, right? But a way that we can all give, and I said this at the beginning, is by going to fillthestadium.com, by sponsoring a child in need, by helping them to be out of poverty, help to move them beyond that by providing shelter and food and clothing, water, basic necessities. And I love that my family has made the time to look through some of those kids and pick one to sponsor, that, we got to involve my children in that process. So something that's really special for our family, and I would encourage you to maybe do that with your family as well. Fillthestadium.com. Just so much great work that our friends at Compassion International do. So my thanks to Mark Schlereth for spending some time with us and sharing some stories with us on this Christmas week. And my thanks to you for being here listening to the Weekly Slant week in and week out, especially this week when it is a busy week as everybody is gearing up for Christmas. I hope you have a blessed Christmas and look forward to seeing you soon.